A little while ago we reviewed the Sony A6400. Now that was a great little camera. For video, for photo, all kinds of stuff. Great for filmmakers, great for people who want to do kind of all kinds of photography, great all-rounder, had loads of great specs in there. Then of course there's the A6500, which is a lovely little camera as well. And now we're taking a look at the Sony A6600, which I've got to say, I've been shooting with it for the best part of a week. It really does take the best of those two cameras, the A6400 and the A6500, and then creates this awesome little camera. And I've got to say, it really does feel like one of the most complete APS-C mirrorless cameras that I have shot on. Now, as I mentioned before, the A6600 takes some elements from the A6400 and from the A6500 along with its own stuff as well. So from the A6400, you've got that tilt screen, so you can tilt it up and over the camera so you can take selfies and use it for vlogging. And from the A6500, you've got the in-body image stabilization. Now, it's not the greatest in-body stabilization I've ever used in my life, but I'd always take a little bit of stabilization over nothing. And it definitely helps, especially for vloggers again. Now this camera is definitely a versatile hybrid camera, so it's for photographers and videographers. There's a lot of room there for both types of shooting. But let's talk about image quality first of all. Let's talk about the stills from this camera. Now I was really happy with how these photographs were coming out of the camera. I've been doing a bit of portrait, I've been doing a bit of landscape. Mostly I've been shooting in conditions that weren't ideal, so a lot of rain, a lot of overcast days, but I was really happy with how the camera performed. The actual images themselves I think look really nice. The colors are rendered really well. Skin tones look great. It's got a 24 megapixel sensor inside the camera, which is more than enough for most people. It does give you a little bit of room to crop in post if you want to kind of reposition things or reframe things. And I really just like the look of the images. Going in and editing these in Lightroom and Photoshop, I was actually quite surprised by how much dynamic range there was to play around with. I was very, very impressed. Now you've got a few different options while you're shooting. It's actually pretty fast if you want to do continuous shooting. You've got 11 frames per second to be playing with there. And then you've got additional things like aspect ratios that you can change in camera. So going from 3:2 to 16:9 to 1:1, all in camera, which really helps with composition. You've obviously got the silent shooting mode as well, which you'd probably expect from a mirrorless camera like this. But something that I think is always worth picking up on is the autofocus. Now with Sony cameras, as you can probably imagine, it is just superb. It is some of the best autofocus I've ever used, and that is generally the case with every Sony camera that I go for. If you've ever used a Sony camera before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's so fast and accurate, it snaps on. The eye autofocus is realistically, it's industry leading, it's just ridiculously good, and the real-time eye autofocus just works so well. Now you've got 425 phase detect and 425 contrast autofocus points with about 84% coverage, so that's pretty decent. And just using the A9 real-time eye autofocus, it is incredible. It really is difficult to actually get across how good the autofocus is on a camera like this. Landscape, cityscape, all that kind of stuff is going to be absolutely fine using touch autofocus on the screen or whatever you want to use there. But if you use eye autofocus with portraits, you are going to consistently nail the focus on the eye every time. It is such an impressive thing to watch. Now, obviously, as a Sony camera, this is not just about stills, and as I mentioned earlier on, this is very much a hybrid camera for stills and for video. So as you'd expect from Sony, there's some pretty decent video specs in here, and much like the A6400 and the A6500, this is definitely a camera that would appeal to filmmakers and kind of budding videographers. So you've got 4K at up to 30 frames a second, you've got full HD 1080p at up to 120 frames a second, nothing crazy there, that's pretty much what you'd expect. It's 8-bit video at 420 internal or 422 external, and you've got things like a headphone port on the camera, S-Log 3 built in so you can get better dynamic range, and things like that, which enable you to have a bit more of a pro feel about your video. So I thought I'd vlog this part of the video for a couple of different reasons. Partly to show off how good this system is as a vlogging system, and partly to show off the 4K video. So I'm shooting in 4K right now. I've got the screen flipped up at the back of the camera so I can actually see myself, keep myself in frame. Now there's a few reasons this is so good, not just for video, but for vlogging in particular as well. Part of it is to do with that screen at the back. You know, I can flip it up, keep myself in the frame, make sure I'm not going crazy or doing anything ridiculous. Part of it is the in-body stabilization, which I'm using right now. So I'm just holding the camera with my hand. Haven't got a tripod or a stabilizer or anything like that. Hopefully it's smoothing this footage out. And a big part of it is the autofocus. So the real-time eye autofocus, which I can see working right now as a square over my eye, just keeping me in focus, which is such a massive help while vlogging like this. The video from the A6600, much like pretty much any Sony camera I've ever used actually, just looks really good. It's nice and detailed, nice and crisp. I'm definitely a big fan of it. I find it very easy to work with, to color grade, and just to generally work with it in post as well. Another thing which just adds to how good this camera is for vlogging is the size and the weight of it. You know, it's very lightweight, very small and compact. It's easy to take down here. I didn't even bring a bag with me. I just literally just came down here with the camera to do this little vlog segment, and now I'm just walking around with it in my hand. Very nice to have such a light camera. Now, design and feel wise, Sony have significantly improved the battery life of this camera. It seems to run for a lot longer now, and it also feels really nice to hold. It feels great in the hands, and everyone who I've kind of been talking with about this camera and showing them the camera says the same thing. As soon as they touch it, it just feels good. And I think part of that is to do with this deceptively deep grip. You know, the grip feels great. It's not so deep that it makes the camera big and bulky, but it's deep enough to get your hand all the way around. And I'm not having any problems with my fingers. I've got quite big hands, and I'm not having any problems at all getting my fingers in there. It's much more comfortable. It also feels like the camera is better made than before. It just feels like a very well constructed piece of kit. It's also just a very small, compact camera. You know, it's lightweight, it's easy to carry around. It's great for travel. In fact, this would make a great travel system, what with the capability of the stills and the video in such a small package. You've got so much glass to choose from now in terms of lens choice. There's just a lot out there. But overall, Sony have made this feel good to hold while still retaining a small, lightweight form factor. Sony have removed the pop-up flash, which personally doesn't bother me in the slightest, but it's worth being aware of in case that's something that you do use. But otherwise, it's just a great feeling camera. The EVF is nice and bright, it's nice and clear. The screen on the back is nice and bright and clear as well. It's a touch screen, as you'd probably expect. And as I mentioned before, it flips all the way up and over, so you can actually see yourself whether you want to take selfies or do some vlogging. Although I would mention that if you're using a shotgun mic or something like that on top of the camera, that is going to obstruct the screen. So in that situation, you might be better off using a lavalier mic. Now, ultimately, like I said before, this is a great hybrid camera, you know, great for stills and for video. Sony really excel at that kind of thing, having that hybrid camera for hybrid shooters, such as myself. This is great for someone like me who wants to be able to take photos and video all the time, and sometimes on the same shoot, I just want to be doing both without really having to change systems or anything like that. It's also great for budding videographers who want to be getting into video, budding photographers, who want to have the options that this camera affords. You know, there's a lot of ways to get creative with this camera. And of course, vloggers as well, with the flip over screen, with the in-body stabilization, headphone port, again, lots of creative ways to shoot. And obviously that autofocus is just mind-blowing. And for anyone who wants to get into photography or video, they are going to find that autofocus a massive help. Really, really can't overstate how good that autofocus is. It would also make for a fantastic second camera, a B camera, for anyone who's got a full frame Sony camera and actually wants to get something else that's smaller, something that they can just take around like a travel system, an everyday camera, or to have it as a second video option if you're shooting interviews and things like that. Have your main camera and then have this, the B camera. You're going to be able to get some really great stuff. And like I said at the beginning of this video, this really does just feel like probably the most complete APS-C mirrorless camera that I have ever used. Now, I know I've already summed up the camera, and I'm actually recording this after I've edited all that part of the video, but I've had a bit of time to kind of think about the camera and stuff like that. It's not so much a massive revolution in terms of an APS-C mirrorless camera, as much as it is, this is probably a little bit cliche, but as much as it is an evolution of things like the A6400 and the 6500. You know, there's nothing crazy in here like 4K 60 or anything like that, but it just does everything very well. And it kind of has all of the bits that you want from the different cameras to make this a very complete system, which, to be honest, I do really appreciate, because there's just been bits missing from stuff like the A6400 and the 6500, and this one just doesn't feel like that. So I really, really do like the camera. Now, if you have any questions about the A6600, pop them down in the comments as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the camera as well, so pop them down there as well. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up, and also to subscribe, you know, because there's new stuff all the time, and you wouldn't want to miss out. So go ahead and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.